Okay, so it's fine to go ahead, right?
It should be yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Oh, let me just put my phone on silent. So everybody could see, right?
Yes, we're seeing.
Okay, great. So
Right. Good day, everyone. This is Group's one presentation on understanding self, which is exploring leadership in chapter 4. Our group members are myself, which is Kelvin Flores, Kenisha Paul Macano, and Zaria Ashby. Now we have Zaria will take you through the presentation.
okay, so this is just a little chapter overview. This chapter explores the relationship between self-awareness and leadership. A few psychological concepts and theories will be covered, some of which are the self-concept, self self-esteem, and self-confidence in order to explore the relationship between the two. The chapter
Excuse me,
covers how.
Zaria. Right.
Mhm.
Um, this Teams does give problems when you open up the presentation, so it'll take a while to come up, but it now came up, so you could go ahead.
Oh, so everybody's seeing now then.
I don't know if it's for
Yep,
me.
we're seeing it now.
Okay, well, if you guys can't see, just let me know, okay?
All right.
I never presented using this platform before. Okay. Right. So the chapter looks at how self-understanding relates to leadership and how it is effective in the leadership process. Well, as mentioned in previous chapters, leadership happens in the context of interpersonal relationships. So the chapter highlights that self-understanding is essential to authenticity or being authentic in these relationships. The reader is challenged to think about those things which shape their personal identity and fuel their motivations. It also explores how the reader forms their values and the role of values in developing character. So what I'm going to present the first part of the chapter. If you guys have any questions along the way or would like to contribute anything, um, feel free to stop me and do so, okay? Okay, so the first part of the chapter is development of self for leadership. This aspect of the chapter talks about the concept of introspection, which is the examination or observation of one's mental and emotional processes. The importance of recognizing one's strengths and weaknesses as it relates to the leadership process is also highlighted. So, in this part of the chapter, what we are basically challenged to do is to sort of look inwards and to think about ourselves and what some of our strengths and weaknesses are. So you might be probably asking yourself the question, hopefully, why do I have to think about my strengths and weaknesses as it relates to leadership? Both your strengths and weaknesses are very important in the process. You might be wondering, well, why not just strengths? But it's important to think about what your strengths and what your weaknesses are also. We'll touch a little more on that later, but knowing your strengths, basically, it allows you to know like what your capabilities are, um, how well you function in a certain situation, and knowing your weaknesses, it basically lets you know what your limitations are. It allows you to have a chance to sort of be humble or practice humility as a leader as well, to basically acknowledge that, okay, well, as a leader, there are certain things that I can't do or certain things that I might need help with. Continuing. According to Venice, the common observation of many acknowledged leaders is that no one can teach you about yourself except you. To achieve awareness, self-awareness, studying yourself is a necessary requirement. He observes 4 lessons from which one can develop self-knowledge, which are: You are your own best teacher. Accept responsibility. Blame no one. You can learn anything you want to learn, and true understanding comes from reflection on your own experience. Right, so like I was saying before, it is important to know and to be able to identify your strengths and weaknesses. Each person is different and will bring a different set of strengths and weaknesses to any situation. Knowing your strengths and weaknesses is a part of the process of understanding yourself. So again, it's important to know these things, strengths especially, because it will basically let you know how well you could apply yourself in given situations, particularly when working with others. Some of your strengths, if overemphasized though, become your weaknesses, and things you consider weaknesses may actually be seen as strengths by others. So again, that's why it's very important to have knowledge of these things. So I'll just give two examples of why I say that. So the first example, you may have a strong sense of responsibility and a take charge attitude when it comes to completing tasks, right? This can be a great strength to your group when it comes to getting things done, but it can also be a weakness in a group or when completing a task where delegating is needed. This take charge attitude and a strong sense of responsibility can lead you to micromanaging or even excluding your group members. Another one, you might also perceive yourself as a perfectionist, and you personally might consider this as a weakness because of certain disappointments that being a perfectionist may have brought into your own personal life, but this is actually something that could work well in a group setting if it was applied well. So again, it's important to know, or to just basically have a good idea of what your strengths or what you think your strengths and your weaknesses are. Right, so just to emphasize, leadership self-awareness grows when you can identify your personal strengths and weaknesses in working with others towards change. Acknowledging and being aware of your strengths and weaknesses helps you to effectively work towards change and the best possible outcomes. Okay, before I proceed, just want to make sure everybody is following on. Anybody have any questions or anything they would like to say or add? It's fine if not, I just want to know.
No, it goes over.
Not right now.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Moving on. Well, I will have questions for you guys though, so I hope you all keeping up. Okay, so the next part, under the subtopic of strengths and weaknesses, identifying your passions and strengths. So it can be sometimes difficult to pinpoint or properly identify what our strengths are. Clifton and Nelson advise that you listen to yourself when you feel like you have accomplished something great when performing a task. So this is one of the ways that you could basically identify, what your strengths, what your strong points are. When you do something and you have a feeling of like you accomplished something, a great sense of accomplishment and achievement, or you feel like, oh, I did something and I felt really good. This is like a good thing to take note of and listen to. So they also recommend that you could find your strengths by trying these strategies. So the first one is to listen to yourself when you have done something well, even if no one else noticed. So basically the same thing of doing something and feeling really accomplished or feeling that, okay, I felt really, really good when I did this thing. The second one is to identify the satisfaction you feel when you know something you did was terrific and gives you a feeling of well-being. The third one is to know what things you find easy to learn quickly. So this could be anything. They could be talking to strangers, giving advice, being organized. It's just that when you do something, you find, okay, it was kind of easy, just take note of that. The fourth one is to study your successes, so clues of excellence and for glimpses of what can be excellent. These things that you do very well. So, like I said, again, it could be anything, whether it's giving a speech, um, being encouraging, or it could be anything. Look carefully at where you have achieved certain successes, and it will be easy to identify these things that you do very well. And the fifth one is to think about your patterns of excellence. So when you're practicing a skill, it could be anything, again, singing, dancing, cooking, and you feel that every time you do it, okay, I did this once, I did this twice, I did this a third time, and every time I do it, I'm improving. This is something to take note of. Identifying these things and labeling them as your strengths or these things which you are good at can help improve your self-esteem and your self-confidence by acknowledging that you bring bring talents to certain situations and that you could contribute to the leadership of a particular cause. Okay, sorry. So on to developing your talent now. So on the topic of gaining self-awareness and knowing yourself and knowing who you are as a person, knowing yourself also includes knowing your talents. According to Buckingham and Clifton, one of our greatest assets as human beings is our talent. And I would just like to say that everybody has talent, regardless of whether or not they, recognize what it is. So what we are encouraged to do as persons who are learning about leadership and trying to become better leaders is we are encouraged to try to, instead of trying to fix our weaknesses, which is, I guess, a common practice, we're encouraged to instead try to manage them. So we often work from the deficit model. This is basically where we focus on or even obsess about our weaknesses, and you see that everywhere. Even in school, when you're learning something, if you're not good at something, you find, okay, you kind of dwell on that and obsess about that instead of trying to manage it and focus on those things that we are very good at. So what they say is that this takes away from our ability to lead and to work from our talents and strengths. So we don't have to try to fix our weaknesses. We just have to learn to manage them. So one example is public speaking. I know that's something a lot of people struggle with, me personally. So let's just say this is your weakness is public speaking. Instead of trying to become the best public speaker ever or just totally eradicating this weakness, what you need to do is acknowledge first that is something that you're really not good at, is a weakness that you have. So you acknowledge what your weakness is, and then you find ways to deal with it and manage it. And in this case, one way is that, okay, if you have to do a presentation and it requires you to do public speaking, you could do things to make it easier to manage your weakness. You could prepare beforehand. If you're in a group, instead of you doing the presentation or you being the one to go and do public speaking, you could practice what it is you are good at and focus your energy into other aspects of this presentation. So if you're really good at, for example, your strength is research or organizing, this is something that you should probably focus on. So we're not saying that you should ignore your weaknesses. Instead, be conscious and aware of what they are and find ways to manage them. Managing your weakness will allow you to have more time to focus on your strengths. And when you are able to focus on your strengths, you have chances to actually apply them in different situations. Buckingham and Clifton propose two assumptions that can guide you in your leadership. So one is that each person's talents are enduring and unique, and each person's greatest room for growth is in the areas of his or her greatest strength. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I just want to ask a question. Anybody could answer. Please answer. Don't be afraid. Do you guys believe or think that everyone has talents? Yes or no?
Yes, I believe that everybody has talent. I think what happens is sometimes we don't explore those talents because I speak for myself. Sometimes you are being an introvert. Sometimes when you're around persons who may be extroverts and they are outgoing and everything and they can do so much, you as an introvert, you sometimes tend to stay in your shell. And if, for example, you look at your friends and you see that they can sing, for example, sing, dance, do whatever, and then you telling yourself, well, they could do all that, but me, I don't think I have any talent. I don't think I can be on their level. And for example, you don't explore, you don't search within yourself to explore and see what you can do. So I just always tell everybody that there's always a hidden talent. You just have to find it. Take time to sit down and search yourself. That's my input on it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they basically trying to encourage us to do. You have these. I think everybody has things that they're not good at. They have weaknesses, but we are encouraged to look at those things that we're really good at, our strengths, and try to focus on those things and develop those things more. Okay, so I'll move on now. Still on the topic of developing your talent. So this philosophy, leading from this philosophy of talents and strengths is an outgrowth of a new emerging field called positive psychology. So according to Peterson, positive psychology is a scientific approach to studying human thoughts, feelings, and behavior with a focus on strengths instead of weaknesses, building the good in life instead of repairing the bad, and taking the lives of average people up to great, instead of focusing solely on moving those who are struggling up to normal. So, again, just to emphasize, is basically focusing on these good things within ourselves, the good aspects and our strengths. This field of psychology moves away from the approach of looking at what is wrong with an individual and instead paying attention to what is right in each person. And you'll find that leading from this framework will energize you and will also open you up to new possibilities and allow you and others to do what you are best at. Okay, so this is a metaphor that Rat and Clifton proposes something that's good that we could all use to guide us in our daily lives, daily actions and interactions. So It's just the theory. It's the theory of the Don's theory of the dipper and bucket. I found it was kind of interesting. So everyone has something like an invisible bucket that can get emptied or filled on a regular basis by an invisible dipper. When your bucket gets emptied, you feel negative and let down. And when your bucket gets filled, you feel positive. Rath and Clifton emphasize that the dipper is a powerful tool in leadership, which allows us to fill another person's bucket by saying positive things and again, focusing on what a person is good at. You also have the power to make someone else feel smaller or diminished by using the dipper to dip from someone else's bucket. When you use the dipper to fill someone else's bucket, your own sense of self-esteem can also be enhanced. You affirm your own and others' strengths and talents when you fill your own bucket and the bucket of other persons. So just something to think about and to keep in mind. So again, on the topic of managing our weaknesses. So the goal is to learn how to manage weaknesses so that we'll have free range to develop our strengths to such an extent that our weaknesses become totally irrelevant. A person can either manage weaknesses so that they do not repress other strengths, or they can overcome their weaknesses and turn them into strengths. There are some weaknesses that can be very problematic though because they affect your daily functioning. For example, having a speech impediment, being someone who's very nervous, having the inability to do public speaking, or the inability to interact or engage with others. These kinds of weaknesses must be dealt with head on. So again, just to emphasize, I'll use the public speaking example because that is something I can relate to very well. So again, on the topic of public speaking, to manage this weakness, you could do things to make the public speaking process much easier and much more comfortable for you. You could practice beforehand, you could use cue cards, and when doing presentations where you have to engage in public speaking, you could partner up with someone who might be very good at it, or somebody who's much better at public speaking than you. So that's just to give you an idea of what is meant when we say managing our weaknesses instead of trying to fix them or get rid of them. Okay, so I have a next question, guys. Do you guys have any weaknesses? It doesn't have to be anything personal. I just want to hear, like me, my weakness, one of my weaknesses is public speaking. What one of your weaknesses is, and how do you think you could manage it? Anybody?
Zaria, I well, I was going to say something before this question.
Oh,
But-
okay, no, go ahead, say you could always come back to this.
What I was going to tell you was we was touching on don't try to fix your weakness, but manage it. And I just wanted to share that like during my tenure and when I was working and stuff, I had a problem with being like assertive kind of way, and I would just let everybody dump work on me until it just gets too much, like overwhelmingly too much. And I wouldn't say, well, hey, this is too much for me. I wouldn't speak up and I wouldn't say anything. And then at the end of the day, I am left with backlog. And then on top of that, you're getting in trouble with bosses. You know, they want to know why you can't complete certain tasks.
Yeah.
So what I did is I had to learn to talk to myself and say, listen, You can't let people continue to do this to you, because at the end of the day, you're the one who probably may get sent home, for not speaking up, right? And when you touched on managing weakness, that thought came to mind, because I had to learn how to manage, this. I don't know. I don't know how you could call it, but I call it like just don't want to be assertive, just staying quiet and not saying anything. And well, the question that you touched on, if we had any weakness, another weakness of mine is also public speaking. I tend to get very nervous. So what I tend to do is I need to speak first. I can't let others go and then I wait, because I really can't. It builds up the nervousness. So I ask others if it's okay, that I go first, so that I could just get it out of the way. I take a deep breath, I get it out of the way, I take my time, and that's one way that I learn to manage the public speaking. Like whenever we have, a number of persons having to go, especially with studies online, that's how I do it.
Great. And that's actually something, I could relate to as well. Yeah. Even the not being able to be assertive, that's something I could relate to as well. So it's great that we could manage our weaknesses.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll go on to esteem and confidence now. So how you think about yourself and how you feel about yourself plays a major role in your motivations and how motivated you are. So now, like I mentioned in the earlier half of the presentation, we'll touch on some psychological concepts pertaining to self. So the first concept is the self-concept. Self-concept is how we objectively describe ourselves. It is usually based on our roles and attributes. For example, I'm a student and I'm very caring. Or I'm a daughter and I'm extremely introverted. So your self-concept, that's basically how you perceive your behaviors, abilities, characteristics, how you perceive yourself. That's just answering the question. That's the embodiment of the question. Who am I? And our self-perception is important because it affects our motivations, our attitudes, and our behaviors. It also impacts how we feel about the person that we think we are and whether we see ourselves as being competent or if we have self-worth, and that's very important in this aspect. Because you should see yourself as somebody who is competent, especially on the topic of leadership. Self-esteem is the subjective element of how you feel about yourself. So you might say, okay, for example, I'm a really good listener, but I'm not good at making friends. I can't relate to people very well. You might feel really happy with yourself about being able to listen to others, but really upset or really depressed or disappointed in yourself with having poor social skills. Sorry. So your self-esteem, that's just basically how you feel about yourself. Your self-esteem is enhanced if you can identify your strengths and weaknesses and know that you are growing and making progress in those areas that you want to improve. Recognizing your weaknesses and honoring your strengths are a major part of working towards a higher self-esteem. And we'll just elaborate. High self-esteem is described as being a result of you valuing your own self-concept. And low self-esteem might mean that, you might expect something better or different than how you feel. So you might not see the value in certain aspects of yourself. You might not like certain things about yourself. On to a very important concept now, self-confidence. Self-confidence is described as the ability to know that you can rely on your strengths, competencies, and skills in many contexts in which you find yourself. So to achieve or to work towards having a higher self-esteem, and self-confidence, we must learn to accept those things about ourselves which we cannot change. So on the topic of understanding ourselves and gaining self-awareness, it's important to know, well, okay, as a person, there are things that you can change about yourself, and then there are things that you cannot change. For example, physical things about yourself. Well, you have a lot of physical things about yourself that you can't change, and well, probably some things that you could change. But a part of working towards having a higher self-esteem and being more self-confident, especially as leaders, is to learn to accept certain things about ourselves. And instead of trying to change things, we can try to change the way we perceive things about ourselves or practice cognitive reframing. Cognitive reframing is basically like when you think or perceive something, or you try to think or perceive something differently. So let's just say there's something that you don't like about yourself. For example, being shy. Um, you might look at that as being a really bad thing, but you could practice cognitive reframing and try to look at it differently. Hey, being shy is not that bad. Um, look at it as you being somebody who is thoughtful, somebody who is reflective. Instead of looking at it as oh, okay, I'm a shy person, it's such a bad thing, blah blah blah. So on to the topic of understanding yourself. So how much of the way that we are can we attribute to our environment, the way that we were socialized, our genetics, or the surroundings that we grew up in? So right now we're looking at the concept or the theory of nature or nurture. According to Sussman, nature refers to all the genes and hereditary factors that influence who we are, from our personality traits to our physical appearance. And nurture refers to all those environmental variables that impact who we are, including our early childhood experiences, how we were raised, our social relationships, and surrounding culture. So becoming aware of the influence of either nature or nurture in your own development is important or essential to understanding yourself, understanding who you are. But let's try to understand the concept of nature or nurture first. Actually, I have a video here. I don't know if it will play. Let's hope it plays. I might have to come out of the presentation to play. Okay, let's go with yes. Will it play? I don't know. Okay. Okay. Forgive me, guys. Anybody have any idea of how I can get this to play from here? Okay, great, it will play. Y'all let me know if y'all can see it. Y'all can see this and hear this?
Yeah, we're seeing here, and we're hearing too.
Yes, I can see it.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to play it now. But like I said, if you want me to stop or pause or anything, feel free to let me know, right?
Have you noticed that you're different to your relations, parents or carers, your next door neighbor, the kid who lives across the street, and everyone else on the planet? In fact, you're unique. But do you really know why you are different? Why are we all different to each other? Why does any organism have different characteristics to another organism? The answer lies in a long-running debate called nature versus nurture, or genetics versus environment, which is a little less catchy. Nature refers to our genetics, the unique combination of genes that we have naturally inherited from our biological parents from their DNA. Many characteristics are controlled by our genes, including our blood group, eye color, or natural hair color. Some diseases are also caused by our genes. For example, cystic fibrosis. The color of a flower or a fruit is controlled by genes in plants. Nurture refers to the effect of the environment on characteristics. The word literally means care. Examples of characteristics that are determined by the environment are weight or mass, which is dependent on your diet, or the presence of a scar. Some diseases may be caused by environmental influences, such as type 2 diabetes or coronary heart disease. Imagine a plant has not received enough sunlight or water. This may influence the height of the plant or the number of fruits produced. We would say that the environment has influenced these characteristics too, or that a plant has been affected by nurture. Can you decide if each of these characteristics is controlled by inherited characteristics, the environment, or both? Where would each go on a Venn diagram? Pause the video while you think. Did you get them all right? The effect of genetics and the environment on characteristics has been researched using identical twins. Can you think why this is? Identical twins have identical DNA, so in theory should have identical characteristics. It follows that any differences between a pair of identical twins could be due to the influence of the environment on their characteristics. In fact, twins often grow up to have very different personalities and preferences beyond their physical similarities. These studies showed that many characteristics are influenced by both genetics and the environment. Some studies actually used twins' identical genomes as a control to prove the effect of the environment on the body. For example, one study showed how skin aged differently by comparing smoker twins with non-smoker twins. Remember that the characteristics of a living organism are influenced by its genetics and its interaction with the environment, so both nature and nurture are responsible.
Please like and share our videos with your friends. If you have any questions that you want help with, just comment below.
Okay, so that was just a video just to kind of help us understand the concept a bit more. Anybody have any questions or anything they would like to say before I move on? No? Yes? No? Okay. Okay. So, well, regardless of, whether we could attribute the way that we are to nature or nurture, or a combination of both. It doesn't really, well, I wouldn't say that it doesn't really matter. It matters, but it's possible to develop certain characteristics or traits on your own. And on the topic of leadership, that's very important because there would be certain skills or traits that you would want to try to develop. You also cannot change or control the perception that others have of you, but you can make the decision to be as authentic as you can possibly be when trying to be the person that you want to be. Sorry, on the point of developing certain characteristics, I was just supposed to say, I just wanted to say, so like I've said before, you have certain things that you can't change about yourself, okay? For example, you can't change your height, but you could learn a skill, whether it would be organization, and again, on my favorite example, public speaking. So there are things that you could learn on your own, right? So you can't change or control the perception that others have of you, but you can make the decision to be as authentic that you can possibly be when trying to be the person that you want to be. And as mentioned before in previous lectures, authenticity is very important and the topic or the practice of leadership. And while we know that being authentic basically means that you know who you are, what you believe in, and you're sure of your values and beliefs, even when having to interact with others. Sorry. Discussing your self-awareness is a form of the psychological study of individuality. It is important to practice personal insight and look at human behavior as well. By knowing how others respond, you can assess how their response is like or unlike your own, and whatever the phenomena about various theories of human behavior, you can then connect with what is most like you or least like you to better understand yourself and see how others might be similar or different from you. So, coming to the end of my portion of the presentation, self-awareness in leadership, it helps you understand how your personality traits, habits, and abilities affect your interactions with others. So is very important. Um, so this is it for my portion of the presentation. Just want to say thanks to those persons who contributed and also to everybody listening. I'll hand you over to Kelvin now.
You could go ahead and share the presentation. Just skip for me, so that way it'll be easier. Right. Factors that shapes your identity. There are many factors that contributes to one identity. Here we have a list of a few, such as your ethnic background, your racial background, cultural background, religious background, sexual orientations, gender identity, and your financial status or status. But a lot of people confuses ethnic, racial, and cultural background. They are not the same thing. Uh, for example, ethnic background deals with where the ethnicity refers to a excuse me, cultural identification, whereas racial background basically deals with race and physical traits, and cultural background is just social behaviors, customs that people follows. Although these are factors that shapes your identity, they can cause conflict within a person. For example, um, somebody from who comes from a religious background grew up thinking that there are one relationship between a man and a woman. Whereas someone that struggling with their sexual orientation, trying to find their self, trying to find their identity, would come into conflict with that. So these factors all, well, individually they are okay, but if someone's is, hold on one second, move my hand. Sorry about that. Yeah, as I was saying, these factors helps make up your identity, but at the same time, it can cause problems as you go on, because somebody who has come from a wealthy family won't have the same morals and values that somebody from a less fortunate family. I don't know if you guys ever encountered something like that. There are some fortunate people who really mean, really selfish, and you come across some less fortunate people who really caring, really helpful. So it goes both ways, good and bad. I don't know if everybody ever experienced that, but yeah. Next slide.
You know, Oh, and it's funny that you say, some more fortunate people are very mean and some less fortunate people are nicer. And in my experience, um, it's in my personal experience, it's kind of been the opposite for me. I
I
found
mean,
that
yeah.
people that, sorry,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I found that a lot of people that are more fortunate, they were nicer to me, and people that were less fortunate, not so much. And it probably is nothing personal, but more so sometimes people that are less fortunate they have more going on in their mind, which might affect their attitude and behavior. Um, but I found the opposite. More fortunate people have been nicer to me, in my experience.
That was just my example. It goes both ways. It have very respectable, fortunate people out here, and well, it have some fortunate people, unfortunate people. Just I don't want to say better towards the world, but that's how they see things, like the world unfair or whatever. But it all comes down to values and beliefs, and as I'm going on to here now, belief shapes values, which influence thoughts and actions, whereas values influence your behavior because you use them to decide between alternatives. So as you rightfully say, you sorry, who was speaking?
What's a show?
All right. As you rightfully said, you had the opposite experience, and that's all where someone grew up believing that the world unfair to me, so I just gonna be bitter and harsh towards the world. Whereas you could have the opposite. You grew up thinking, you know what, I will make the best of this experience, and you grow up believing that you will be a better person, and that's how your thought process and thought values grows as with you. So that is where they say values influence your behavior because you use them to decide between alternatives. Our values and beliefs affect the qualities of our life, our work, and our relationship. So if you grow up with good values, you will treat the people around you, I wouldn't say perfectly, but you will treat the people around you fairly. Whereas you grow up with bad morals and values, the people around you would feel it as well. Some examples of values are loyalty, fairness, courage, compassion, respect, and well, the opposite for that is, disrespect, disloyal, etc. An example of beliefs is lying is bad, God created the world, cheating is immoral, etc. Next slide. Character and ethical behaviors. Character refers to the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual, whereas the ethics defines a moral principle that governs a person's behavior. Some character traits are religious, honest, loyal, devoted, etc. Whereas some example of ethical behaviors are honesty, loyalty, integrity, respect, selflessness, responsibilities. Next. Zaria. Hello. Right.
Personality, style, and preferences. You can keep clicking, Zario. So hi guys, good evening. Good evening. My name is Kanisha and I will be doing the personality, styles, and preferences. You all could hear me, right?
Yes, yes. I hear you.
Yeah.
Okay. So Mr. Carl Jung in the 1923 he identified 4 core functions of the human adaptation which are called personality temperaments. These 4 functions include how we relate to the world, which which would be considered introverts or extroverts. How we perceive the world, which would be either based on our senses or intuition. How we make judgment based on if it is we make judgment based on feeling or thinking, and how we make decisions based on judging or how we perceive certain things. Any of y'all by chance did a personality test to see how or what personality type y'all did or y'all have?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my personality was of course introverted. I lacked social skills.
Well, it's not just about that. Not just one. That's just one part of it. So moving forward, I will explain more in detail about it. So if y'all could just grab like a pen or a paper, there are 4 categories that y'all could choose from, and in each category there are 2 options in which y'all could choose from, right? So while the presentation is going on, if y'all could just make a note of these options that you would have choose, which would best suit you or best identify you. Next slide, Zaria, please.
It's something simple. Just it'll be look out for key letters, and when you see a letter, you just write it down. You just need 4. For
Okay.
example,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, you all understood that, right?
Repeat it again.
Okay, so there are 4 core functions moving forward, right? And out of those 4 functions were the ones that I just called out. You're going to choose one out of the 2 options. So in the first bracket, there's extrovert and introvert. I will go on to explain each one of them, and y'all would choose which one out of the pairs will best suit y'all.
Okay, great. Ready.
Yeah?
The letters will
Okay,
be
no
by
problem.
them. So you can,
Yeah, ready.
Right. So the first core function shows the difference between those who are oriented to the outer world, which are extroverts, and those who prefer their own inner world, which are introverts. Next slide. Extroverts prefer the outer world of people and things. Extroverts do best thinking out loud and in dialect with others. So if this best suits you, you will just jot down E. Yeah? Next slide. Introverts are more oriented to the inner world of feelings and ideas. You're going along with me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I got down the
Yes.
but the letters.
Pardon me?
We're jotting down the letters as you go along.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you could either choose from E, which is extroverts, or I, introverts. So
Yeah.
either or. Right, Zaria. Right, so sometimes people will say just because you're an extrovert does not mean that you're outgoing. And if you're introvert does not mean that you're shy or withdrawn, right? As you can see in this picture here. Sometimes it just refers to the preference or orientation of the outer or inner will. Next. The second core function covers the preference of perceiving the world around you, either through sensory or intuition. Next. Sensing relies on your 5 senses and prefer concrete facts and detail. Next. Intuition prefer big pictures and like to see things in a whole. Next. So we're just going to show this picture here. I want you all to take a look at this picture. Next. All right. So anybody could tell me what they could remember from this picture?
Yeah, the person was holding a balloon. She was wearing a red dress. I'll give somebody else a chance.
I just gonna
Anybody
answer,
else?
so what she said, and she was on the
It looked
tree.
windy.
The tree.
Don't forget the tree.
Yeah, it looked like she was on the tree.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
I think she was wearing a hat as well.
Right. So a person who would be more strong on the sensory side would have paid more attention to the details, like for example the number of trees or the color used, specific features or landmark, while the intuitive person would just look at the overall general picture and remember the theme. Well, it was just a lady in red with some trees, for example, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes, true.
Right. I hope you're still taking down your letters. Next slide, Daria.
Yeah.
Right. So the third core function is how you process information, either through thinking or feeling. Next. Feelers prefer to make judgments that account for relationship and that are important to the human value beliefs, with an empathy of personal friendship. That's a feeling. Sorry. Thinkers, on the other hand, they use logic and rational. Their rule is head over heart. So they don't believe in what your heart thinks. They believe in what is logical or what makes sense. Yeah? Next slide. Next one.
Excuse, I'm not too sure if it's only me, but the slides are different from what you are reading. So like, let's just say you were
Yes,
reading.
I know. The slides are delayed a little bit. I don't know why. But the slides are really delayed. I'm sorry about that. But you are following with me, right? Just want to make sure.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I will try to wait until the slide actually loads to explain. Yeah.
Okay.
So some fun facts about thinkers and feelers. Any person could be both of them, both a thinker and a feeler. It all depends on the given situation at hand. Yeah. Next slide. Sorry. Right. Another fun fact is that for this particular type, it's also there's a pattern based on gender. So the pattern is 60% of men are thinkers, while 60% of female are feelers. So those are just two fun facts about thinkers and feelers. Next slide. So the fourth core function involves on how you prefer to make a decision, either by judging or by perceiving. Next slide. Judging prefer order and empathy, resolving issues, making decisions to create order. They prefer to tie up loose ends, seek closure. They like a clear beginning, deadlines, and a clear ending. So more or less, they like to be well defined. Next slide. Perceivers are more open-minded and like to gather information and be more flexible. They like to leave things with an open ending or unresolved. Next slide. So can anybody tell me which one of these two diagrams is a person who is judging and a person who is perceiving?
I guess the one that will scroll up is the one that perceiving it, and the one that like straightforward is the one that understand it. Well, the bureau.
The one that judging. Yes, that is correct. So the one that judging is on the left-hand side. Nice, clear steps going ahead. While the person who is perceiving, they are just all over the place, more or less. Next slide. So y'all remember that I would have asked y'all to select which one would have identified y'all the most. So can anybody just provide me with the 4 letters that they would have selected?
I got ISFP.
I
S.
FP.
F. Yeah.
All right. So for in your case, so these four categories will give you 16 options, right? That you could fall into any of these categories. So for in your instance, you would be considered an artist as your personality type. Yeah?
It is very true. Yes.
ASFP. So you would be considered quiet, friendly, sensible, kind. Those kind of personalities are what you would. Correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Anybody else want to give it a try?
I would like to try.
Mm-hmm.
I had IIFG.
I. No, you can't have 2 I's. It's either I, S. The second one is either S or N.
What was the N for again?
Intuitive.
Yeah, intuitive.
Right. So it will be IN.
FG.
FG. So you're an advocate. Yes, now. INFJ. So I just looking for it. Huh? The explanation. Right. So you seek meaning and connect to ideas, relationship, and material possession. So I would provide the link. I am not given the option to send messages, but I will post the link for the personality test on our group chat, and you all could take your personality test, and it would also explain what it means, how it will affect your relationship, how it will affect your everyday life, and stuff like that. Okay?
Okay.
Next slide, please. Right. Mr. Carl again in the 1920s, a few years after, he came up with different ideas of how people would learn, how these personality traits would learn, right? So that is what we are going to look at now. Next slide. So extroverts, remember, these are people who are outgoing, they like to socialize, they like these kind of outdoor activities. They will learn best in group, doing group work, group discussions, debate, doing presentation, for example, how we are presenting today here. Next slide. Introverts, on the other hand, their learning style would be doing more individual work, listening and observing, not participating much, putting their thoughts and solution in writing instead of verbally expressing it. Next slide. Sensing people appreciate concrete information and details to overall concepts. They would prefer detailed studies and research on a particular topic or issue, being presented with valuable facts. Next slide. Intuitive people focus on details, right? Lots of details. They prefer information that's theoretical and conceptual. So they would go through unpinning theories and principles. They will look at big pictures and abstract ideas. Next slide. Thinkers. They will prefer to lean on being objective, right? They use logic to make decisions. So they would prefer to learn by having opportunities to analyze and ration a specific thought. They are task-based and problem-solving. They like that kind of approach. Next one. Feelers learn by prioritizing relationship and being in a harmonious learning environment. A nurturing learning environment with positive social interaction and being able to feel and understand and care and to be cared for by the teachers and others, this is how they would best learn. Next slide. Judging, or those judges. They approach life on a day-to-day basis. They appreciate order and structures in their life. So a systematic and organized approach to learning would best suit them. And having a clear, like a timetable or listed objective, this would also best suit these type of people. Next slide. Last but not least, which are the perceivers. they adapt a painful approach to life. They learn by perceiving, being flexible, and they would learn by having opportunity to explore and not to be too much into the structured learning. They would prefer to be a little bit more flexible. Any questions?
I have a question for you concerning the learning styles. In terms of the MBTI profile, is it that is something that is set, or is it something that you can change? Because I'm thinking of, in terms of the judging and perceiving, the example that you gave where I think the judging was more straightforward. They had a step towards what they wanted to do, and the perceiving was sort of scrambled. But if you have a different personality, is it something that you can change to get it towards that,
remember,
or
it's
is it
it's
fixed?
also based on the position that you are placed in, you know. So for some instances, it's never, for any of these things, is never a straightforward cut. Well, I am only a perceiver, or I am only a thinker. It would vary depending on the situation that you are put in or placed in.
So it's something that you can work on, more or less.
Yes.
It's not.
Yes.
It's something that varies basically.
Correct.
Okay.
Anybody else? No? Well, that's the end of our presentation. I hope you all enjoyed it and learned a lot from it.
All right, if there are no questions, I'll stop the recording.